The days following my confrontations with Jessica and Tyler felt like walking through a storm. I was barely sleeping, my thoughts consumed with the betrayal, but I channeled that energy into preparing for the inevitable battle ahead. Emily, my lawyer, was working tirelessly to finalize the documents to remove both of them from the agency. It wasn't going to be an easy fight, they both held stakes in the business, and the financial misconduct, while damning, needed to be presented perfectly. Meanwhile, I made sure to put safeguards in place. I called an emergency meeting with the agency's senior staff, framing it as a routine check-in. I didn't mention the affair or my plans to remove Jessica and Tyler, but I subtly reassigned their key responsibilities to other team members, citing their recent trips as the reason. It was during this meeting that I noticed something interesting, murmurs of frustration from my employees. Jessica's recent behavior had apparently rubbed more people the wrong way than I realized. Her sudden insistence on extravagant expenses, her domineering attitude during client pitches, it had all started raising eyebrows. Tyler, too, had been distant and less engaged than usual. These weren't just personal betrayals, their actions were damaging the agency's reputation. I took mental notes, realizing this would work in my favor. If they'd alienated the team, it would be easier to convince everyone that removing them was necessary for the company's survival. A few days later, Emily called me into her office to review the finalized documents. She looked tired but determined. "Mark, I've outlined everything," she said, sliding the papers across her desk. "This is airtight. The financial misconduct alone is enough to remove them, but combined with their breach of trust, it's a strong case. Once we file this, though, you need to be prepared for them to fight back." "Let them," I said, signing my name on the dotted line. "I'm done letting them call the shots." With the papers filed, the wheels were officially in motion. Jessica and Tyler were served notice within 2 days. I wasn't there to witness it, but Emily told me that Jessica's reaction was predictably dramatic: tears, yelling, denial. Tyler, on the other hand, was silent. She described him as stunned, like he hadn't fully processed the consequences of his actions until that moment. The next time I heard from either of them, it was through their lawyer. They were contesting the removal, as I'd expected, but what I didn't expect was the angle they took. Their lawyer claimed that the financial decisions they'd made were in the company's best interest, and that any impropriety was misunderstood. It was a weak argument, but I knew they were stalling for time. Jessica, however, made the first personal move. Late one evening, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Mark, please. Can we talk? Just us." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "There's nothing left to say. Speak to my lawyer." Her reply came almost instantly. "This isn't about the business. It's about us." Us? There was no us anymore. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging curiosity about what she had to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her in public at a coffee shop near my motel. When I arrived, she was already seated, her makeup immaculate as always, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know how we got here." "You got us here, Jessica," I said, keeping my tone even. "You and Tyler." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Mark, I never wanted this to happen. I've made mistakes, huge ones, but I still love you." I clenched my fists under the table, fighting the surge of anger. "You don't destroy someone you love," I said quietly. "You don't lie to them, cheat on them, or steal from them." She reached across the table, but I pulled back. "Mark, please," she said desperately. I was lost. "Tyler," he filled a void, "but it didn't mean I stopped loving you. I don't even know what I feel for him anymore. He's different now. Distant." I froze at her words. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "He's been pulling away. Ever since the papers were served, he's barely spoken to me. I think he's trying to save himself, Mark. He's scared you'll ruin him. I leaned back, processing what she'd just said. The alliance between them was starting to crack, and I could see an opportunity. So now that things aren't going your way, you're turning on each other? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. How poetic. Mark, it's not like that, she pleaded. I don't know what Tyler's planning, but I'm scared. I just want a chance to make things right, with you, with the agency, with everything. I stared at her, unmoved. There's no making this right, Jessica. You and Tyler made sure of that. And if you think I'm going to back down because you're scared, you don't know me at all. Her face crumpled, and she leaned forward, lowering her voice. Then let me help you, she said urgently. I'll testify against Tyler. I'll tell your lawyer everything, about the trips, the money, the affair. Just, don't take everything from me. It was a bold move, one I hadn't seen coming. Jessica was willing to throw Tyler under the bus to save herself. I didn't trust her, not even for a second, but I knew this could be useful. I'll think about it, I said, standing up. But don't expect me to forgive you. Ever. As I walked out of the coffee shop, my mind was racing. Jessica's offer was tempting, but it was also risky. I had no doubt she'd betray me again if it suited her. Still, her desperation told me one thing, their once solid alliance was falling apart. And I was going to use that to destroy them both. The days following my meeting with Jessica were tense, but they also gave me clarity. Her desperation to turn on Tyler was proof of what I'd suspected all along, there was no loyalty between them. Their so-called bond wasn't built on love or trust, it was built on secrecy and lies. And now that everything was falling apart, they were scrambling to save themselves. But if Jessica thought she was the only one trying to cut a deal, she underestimated Tyler. I didn't hear from him directly. Instead, I got a call from Emily one afternoon. Mark, she said, her tone cautious, I just got a surprising email from Tyler's lawyer. You might want to sit down for this. Just tell me, I said, bracing myself. He's offering to cooperate, she said. He claims he can provide evidence against Jessica, financial misconduct, misappropriation of funds, even details about her personal spending habits. In exchange, he wants to retain his shares in the company and avoid a public legal battle. I laughed bitterly. So he's throwing her under the bus, too. I should have known. It gets better, Emily continued. He's also suggesting that Jessica manipulated him into the affair, claiming he was vulnerable and that she took advantage of his position. I gritted my teeth, the sheer audacity of it leaving me momentarily speechless. Tyler wasn't just trying to save himself, he was rewriting the narrative to make himself look like the victim. It was disgusting, but also predictable. What's your recommendation? I asked. Emily hesitated. It's tempting. If Tyler's willing to hand over evidence, it could strengthen our case against Jessica and speed up the process. But letting him keep his shares? That's a big concession. And let's be honest, do you really trust him? No, I said without hesitation. I don't trust either of them. Then we play it smart, Emily said. Let him think we're considering the offer. In the meantime, we dig deeper into his involvement. If we can prove he's just as guilty as Jessica, or worse, we'll have the upper hand. Do it, I said. But don't let him get comfortable. I want him to know he's not off the hook. Over the next few days, Emily and her team worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on both Jessica and Tyler from a distance. Jessica was quiet, probably waiting to see if her offer to testify against Tyler would sway me. Tyler, on the other hand, was back in the office, acting as if nothing had happened. It was infuriating to watch him interact with staff, flashing his easy smile and pretending he wasn't the architect of this betrayal. But cracks were beginning to show. One of the senior managers, Beth, pulled me aside after a meeting. "Mark, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. "Of course," I said, gesturing for her to sit down in my office. She hesitated before speaking, her expression conflicted. "It's about Tyler," she said. "I don't want to get involved in personal matters, but something's off." "Off how?" I asked, my interest piqued. "He's been acting strange lately. Distracted, nervous. And the other day, I overheard him on the phone with someone. He was talking about moving money and covering tracks. I didn't think much of it at first, but now. I'm worried it could affect the company." My blood ran cold. "Did he say anything else?" She shook her head. "No, but I thought you should know." "Thank you, Beth," I said, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'll look into it." After she left, I called Emily immediately. "We need to focus on Tyler's financials," I said. "I think he's hiding something." Emily's team worked quickly, and it didn't take long for them to uncover the truth. Tyler hadn't just been complicit in Jessica's misappropriation of funds, he'd been siphoning money into a separate account under a fake company name. It wasn't just a small amount, either. We were talking tens of thousands of dollars, funneled out over the course of a year. When Emily showed me the evidence, I felt a sick sense of satisfaction. Tyler thought he could play the victim, but this was the smoking gun I needed to take him down. The next morning, I called Tyler into my office. He walked in looking confident, like he thought we were about to negotiate his deal. But when I slid the documents across the desk, his expression shifted. "What's this?" he asked, his voice tight. "Proof," I said coldly. "Of what you've been doing behind my back. The fake company, the stolen money, all of it." He paled, his hands shaking as he flipped through the pages. "Dad, I can explain." "Don't," I said sharply. "I'm done listening to your lies. You've been stealing from the company, from me, while pretending to be some innocent victim. Do you have any idea how pathetic that makes you?" He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to sign over your shares in the company. You're going to resign, effective immediately. And if you fight me on this, I'll take this evidence to the authorities. Do you understand?" For a moment, I thought he might argue, but then his shoulders slumped. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll sign." "Good," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And one more thing, after this, we're done. You're no longer my business partner. You're no longer part of my life." He looked at me, his eyes filled with something that almost resembled regret. "Dad, Save it," I said, cutting him off. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." As he left my office, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, relief. Tyler was my son, and a part of me would always love him. But the man who walked out of that room wasn't the boy I'd raised. He was a stranger. And I had no place for strangers in my life. With Tyler out of the business and my life, I thought I'd finally gained some control over the chaos. But if there was one thing I'd learned about Jessica, it was that she wasn't the kind of person to back down quietly. Her cunning had been one of the traits that first drew me to her. It was captivating when she was on my side, but terrifying when turned against me. A week after Tyler signed over his shares and resigned, I received a notice from Jessica's lawyer. She wasn't going down without a fight. The letter claimed that Jessica had been unfairly ousted from the agency and that I was using my personal grievances to destroy her professional reputation. "She's contesting everything," Emily said when I called her to discuss the letter. "She's claiming wrongful termination and demanding compensation for damages." "She's unbelievable," I muttered. "After everything she's done, she still thinks she's entitled to something." Emily sighed. "Mark, this isn't unusual in cases like this. She knows she doesn't have much legal ground to stand on, but she's hoping to drag this out and wear you down. If she can't win in court, she'll try to win by exhausting you. Let her try, I said, my jaw tightening. I'm not backing down. Jessica's tactics became clear over the following days. Her lawyer filed motions to delay the case, requested endless documents, and attempted to paint me as a controlling husband who was using the agency to punish her for personal failings. It was infuriating, but I refused to let her manipulation get under my skin. What I hadn't expected was how far she'd go. One morning, I walked into the office and found Beth, my senior manager, waiting for me in the conference room. She looked uneasy, clutching a folder in her hands. "What's wrong?" I asked, immediately on edge. "You need to see this," she said, sliding the folder across the table. "It's a press release Jessica sent to a few of our clients." I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. The release was a carefully worded attack on me and the agency, accusing me of creating a hostile work environment and pushing Jessica out because she'd uncovered financial irregularities in the company. She painted herself as a whistleblower, the victim of a ruthless campaign to silence her. "This went out this morning," Beth said. "We've already had 2 clients call, asking if there's any truth to it." I clenched my fists, the rage bubbling just beneath the surface. Jessica wasn't just trying to fight me in court, she was trying to ruin the agency's reputation. My reputation. "Get ahead of it," I said through gritted teeth. "Release a statement denying everything. Make it clear that her claims are baseless and that we'll take legal action if necessary." Beth nodded. "We're on it. But Mark, this is bad. If she keeps this up, it could do serious damage." "She's not going to win," I said firmly. "Not in court, and not here." That evening, I received a call from Jessica. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity, and anger, got the better of me. "What do you want, Jessica?" I said as soon as I answered. Her voice was calm, almost smug. "I wanted to see how you're holding up. I heard about the press release." "You mean the lies you sent out to our clients?" I snapped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" "Wrong with me?" she said, her tone dripping with mock innocence. "Mark, you've left me no choice. You've destroyed my career, my reputation, my life. I'm just fighting back." "You destroyed your own life, Jessica," I said coldly. "Don't try to pin this on me." She laughed, a bitter sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You think you've won, don't you? You think getting rid of Tyler and cutting me out of the agency means you've come out on top. But you forget, Mark, I know everything about you. Every secret, every weakness. If you push me too far, I'll use it all." "You do whatever you think you need to," I said, my voice steady. "But don't expect me to roll over and take it. You've already taken enough from me. You won't take my agency." "Then I guess we'll see who breaks first," she said before hanging up. The next day, Emily called me with an update. "Jessica's lawyer reached out," she said. "She's willing to drop the lawsuit in exchange for a settlement. She wants a financial payout and a small share of the agency's future profits." "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "I'm not giving her a single cent." "I thought you'd say that," Emily said. "But Mark, be careful. She's escalating, and if she keeps going, it could hurt the agency more than we realize." "Let her escalate," I said. "She doesn't scare me." But the truth was, she did. Not because I thought she could win, but because I knew how far she was willing to go. Jessica was cunning, resourceful, and ruthless. She'd already proven she'd do whatever it took to get what she wanted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she had one more card to play. The question was, what? Jessica's warning lingered in my mind. She had threatened to use everything she knew about me, and I couldn't ignore the gravity of her words. Jessica wasn't bluffing, she was the kind of person who always had a backup plan. I just didn't know what it was, and that uncertainty was enough to keep me on edge. I threw myself into protecting the agency, doubling down on client relationships and reassuring staff that the company was on solid ground despite the turbulence. Emily was relentless in her legal strategy, blocking Jessica's every attempt to stall or sabotage the case. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Jessica wouldn't stop until she'd landed a blow that hurt me where it mattered most. The blow came a week later. I was in my office, reviewing contracts, when Beth knocked on my door, her face pale. "Mark, you need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. She handed it to me, and there it was, a video that Jessica had leaked online. My stomach twisted as I hit play. The footage showed me in my home office from months earlier, during a particularly heated argument with Jessica. I was yelling, frustrated and angry, and the video cut to a moment where I slammed my fist on the desk. Out of context, it looked far worse than it was. The captions beneath the video painted me as abusive, unstable, and unfit to run the agency. Jessica had framed it as her proof of why she'd left the company and why she was fighting for her rights. The post was already going viral, with comments pouring in from strangers who knew nothing about the truth. "This is bad," Beth said, her voice shaky. "Clients are calling. Staff are nervous. Mark, she's trying to destroy you." My hands trembled as I set her phone down. I couldn't believe Jessica had stooped this low. But then again, I shouldn't have been surprised. This was her final play, not just to attack the agency, but to ruin my personal and professional reputation. "Release a statement," I said, my voice tight. "Make it clear that the video is taken out of context and that this is part of her smear campaign." Beth nodded but hesitated. "Mark, this isn't just about the video. People are questioning your leadership. They're wondering if the agency is stable." "I'll address the staff," I said. "Call a meeting for this afternoon." The meeting was tense. The employees filed into the conference room, their faces a mix of concern and uncertainty. I stood at the head of the table, forcing myself to project calm even though I felt anything but. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "I know there's been a lot of noise lately, rumors, accusations, even a video that's been circulated online. I want to address it head-on." I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. "The video you've seen was taken out of context. It doesn't reflect who I am as a leader or as a person. Jessica has made it her mission to discredit me and this agency, and I won't let her succeed. This company was built on integrity and hard work, and I'm committed to protecting it." Beth chimed in, backing me up with details about the steps we were taking to stabilize the agency and reassure clients. By the end of the meeting, I could sense that some of the tension had eased, but I knew this was far from over. Later that evening, I received an unexpected call from Jessica. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "What do you want, Jessica?" I said coldly. "You saw the video," she said, her tone smug. "I warned you, Mark. You should have settled with me. You think this is going to break me?" I snapped. "All you've done is prove how desperate you are." "I'm not desperate," she said, her voice hardening. "I'm just playing the game. And I have more, Mark. More videos, more messages. How much are you willing to lose before you admit defeat?" I clenched my jaw, my anger threatening to boil over. "You don't scare me, Jessica." "Maybe I should," she said. "Because this is only the beginning." The next morning, Emily called me into her office. "Mark, we need to talk," she said, her face grim. "What now?" I asked, sinking into the chair across from her. "She's not just targeting you publicly," Emily said. "She's reached out to the board. She's trying to convince them that you're unfit to run the agency and that they should force you out." My chest tightened. "Can she do that?" "She's trying to use the bad publicity against you," Emily explained. The board doesn't have the power to remove you outright, but they can call for a vote of no confidence. If enough members side with her, it could destabilize the agency even further. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. What's our move? Emily's eyes narrowed. We fight back. We prove that her claims are baseless and that she's the one damaging the company, not you. But Mark, this is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? I nodded slowly. I don't have a choice. She's come for everything I care about. I'm not going to let her win. As I left Emily's office, I realized just how far Jessica was willing to go. This wasn't just a fight for the agency or my reputation, it was a battle for everything I'd built, everything I valued. And if she thought I was going to roll over and let her take it, she didn't know me at all. The board meeting loomed like a storm cloud, and as the day approached, I prepared for war. Emily and I worked tirelessly to build my defense, compiling evidence of Jessica's financial misconduct, her attempts to sabotage the agency, and her smear campaign against me. The truth was on my side, but Jessica's lies had already sown seeds of doubt among some board members. By the time I stepped into the boardroom, I knew the stakes couldn't be higher. The conference table was surrounded by the agency's most influential figures, people I'd handpicked to help shape and grow the company. And yet, as I took my seat at the head of the table, I could feel the weight of their scrutiny. Jessica's poison had already started to spread. She arrived moments later, dressed sharply, her expression composed but defiant. She was playing the role of the victim perfectly, and I hated how convincing she looked. This wasn't just a board meeting to her, it was her stage. The chair of the board, a longtime ally named Charles, opened the meeting. Thank you all for being here. As you're aware, this meeting was called to address concerns raised about Mark's leadership and the stability of the agency. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Before we begin, I'd like to state for the record that these concerns are based on false allegations and a deliberate attempt to undermine the agency. Jessica cut in, her voice calm but cutting. Mark, this isn't about you and me. It's about the company and the people who depend on it. Your recent behavior has raised valid questions, and it's my duty to ensure those questions are addressed. The audacity of her words made my blood boil, but I held my tongue. This wasn't the time to let emotions take over. Charles gestured for her to continue, and she launched into her argument. She claimed I'd been erratic and abusive, citing the infamous video as evidence. She accused me of financial mismanagement, painting herself as a whistleblower who'd been unfairly silenced. She even hinted at other employees who had concerns about my leadership, though she conveniently didn't name them. When she finished, the room was silent. Some board members exchanged uneasy glances, and I could tell her performance had landed at least a few punches. But I was ready. I stood, addressing the room with calm authority. Jessica's claims are not only false, they're malicious. She's using a personal vendetta to destabilize this agency and damage my reputation. But I'm not here to argue. I'm here to present facts. Emily handed out folders to each board member, and I began my presentation. I walked them through Jessica's financial misconduct, showing how she had misused company funds for personal expenses. I detailed her attempts to sabotage client relationships and shared the evidence Emily had uncovered of her smear campaign. Then I turned to the infamous video. This clip, which Jessica leaked without context, was recorded during a private argument in my home. I won't deny that I was frustrated, but frustration isn't abuse. What Jessica conveniently left out is that this argument happened because she admitted to misusing company resources. She's taken a moment of vulnerability and weaponized it against me. The board members reviewed the evidence in silence, their expressions shifting as the weight of the truth sank in. Jessica, for the first time, looked genuinely uncomfortable. Finally, I said, looking directly at her, Jessica has repeatedly shown that her actions are driven by self-interest, not the company's well-being. She has no place here, and I trust the board will see that. Charles nodded, his face serious. Thank you, Mark. We'll now open the floor for discussion. The discussion was tense, but it became clear that Jessica's narrative was unraveling. Several board members voiced their support for me, while others expressed outrage at Jessica's behavior. She tried to defend herself, but her arguments were met with skepticism. The evidence was too damning. After what felt like hours, Charles called for a vote. The motion on the table is to affirm Mark's leadership and formally sever Jessica's ties with the agency. All in favor? One by one, hands went up around the table. Jessica's face grew paler with each vote, her composure cracking. When the final count was taken, the motion passed overwhelmingly. She was out. As the board members began to file out, Jessica approached me, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. "This isn't over, Mark," she hissed. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." I met her gaze, unflinching. "I don't need to know, Jessica. Because whatever you do next, I'll be ready." She stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with Emily and Charles. Emily smiled faintly, her relief evident. "You handled that perfectly, Mark. The agency's safe, for now." "For now," I echoed, the weight of the battle still heavy on my shoulders. Charles clapped me on the back. "You've got our full support, Mark. We'll get through this." As I left the boardroom, I felt a sense of closure but also a lingering unease. Jessica might have lost this round, but I knew she wasn't done. Her final play was still coming, I could feel it. And whatever it was, it would push me to my limits. I should have known Jessica wouldn't retreat quietly. She was too cunning, too vindictive, and losing her position at the agency only meant she'd refocus her energy on something more personal. For a few weeks after the board meeting, there was an uneasy calm. I kept expecting her to make a move, but when nothing happened, I began to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally given up. That illusion shattered when I received a knock at my door late one evening. It wasn't Emily or anyone from the agency. It was a reporter. "Mr. Walker," the reporter said, smiling in that way people do when they know they're about to ruin your life. "Care to comment on the allegations against you?" "What allegations?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "Jessica has made some serious claims," he said, flipping open a notepad. "Financial improprieties, unethical business practices, even some personal allegations. She's gone public with everything." My mind raced as he listed off accusations that sounded all too familiar: misusing company funds, fostering a toxic workplace, and even claims of infidelity on my part. Jessica hadn't just gone public, she'd turned the tables, painting me as the villain and herself as the victim. "I have no comment," I said, slamming the door in his face. My hands shook as I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Jessica wasn't just trying to hurt me professionally anymore. She was coming for my reputation, my character, and everything I stood for. The next morning, the fallout began. The story was everywhere: online articles, social media, even a segment on a local news channel. Jessica had given an exclusive interview, complete with crocodile tears and carefully crafted lies. She spoke about how she'd been pushed out of the company after uncovering my wrongdoings, and how she'd suffered emotionally and professionally because of it. The worst part? She'd backed up her claims with just enough half-truths and doctored evidence to make them seem credible. Old emails taken out of context, financial records manipulated to look suspicious, it was all there, laid out in a way that made me look like the villain. Emily called me as soon as the story broke. "Mark, this is bad," she said. "We need to get ahead of this." "How?" I asked, my voice tight. "She's turned the entire narrative against me. Even if we prove she's lying, the damage is already done." "Not necessarily," Emily said. "But we need to act fast. Issue a statement, provide evidence disproving her claims, and consider filing a defamation lawsuit." A lawsuit will take months, I said. By the time it's resolved, the damage to my reputation, and the agency, will be irreversible. Then we need another angle, Emily said. Something that completely discredits her. As Emily worked on the legal side, I started reaching out to people Jessica had involved in her smear campaign. Some of them were clients, others were former employees who had left the agency on good terms. Most of them were skeptical at first, but as I presented my side of the story, complete with evidence they hadn't seen before, the tide began to shift. One former employee, Maria, proved to be a turning point. Jessica tried to contact me a few weeks ago, Maria said. She wanted me to sign an affidavit saying you'd mistreated me. I refused because it wasn't true, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Now I see what she was trying to do. Maria agreed to go on record, providing a written statement that directly contradicted Jessica's claims. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope that I could fight back. Meanwhile, Jessica escalated her attacks. She started leaking personal details about our marriage, including private arguments and intimate moments she twisted into ammunition. Social media exploded with speculation, and every time I opened my phone, I was greeted by a new wave of hate and ridicule. It was exhausting, but I refused to give up. I couldn't. The breakthrough came when Emily uncovered something Jessica hadn't expected, the raw, unedited versions of the financial records she'd manipulated. It turned out she'd left a digital trail, emails to a freelance accountant she'd hired to alter the documents, along with payments from her personal account. "This is it," Emily said, triumphantly handing me the evidence. This proved she fabricated everything. We released the information publicly, alongside a detailed statement refuting her claims. The narrative began to shift almost immediately. News outlets picked up the story, highlighting Jessica's lies and manipulations. People who had once supported her started to turn against her, and even her lawyer quietly dropped her case. The final blow came when Jessica's interview with the press was exposed as part of a paid campaign. She had sold her story to the media for a substantial sum, undermining her claims of being a victim. The revelation shattered whatever credibility she had left, and her name quickly became synonymous with deceit. That evening, as I sat alone in my office, Emily called with the news I'd been waiting for. Jessica's lawyer just reached out. She wants to settle, quietly. She's offering to withdraw all claims if we agree not to pursue further legal action against her. I considered it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to drag her through the courts, to make her pay for everything she'd done. But another part of me, exhausted and ready to move on, just wanted it to be over. "Take the settlement," I said finally. "Let her crawl back into whatever hole she came from." "Done," Emily said. "This is the right call, Mark. You've won." As I hung up the phone, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but also an emptiness I couldn't ignore. I had fought back and cleared my name, but the scars of Jessica's betrayal would never fully heal. I had lost a wife, a son, and the illusion of the family I thought I had. But I still had the agency. I still had my integrity. And as I stared out the window at the setting sun, I realized that was enough. The dust finally settled. Jessica's smear campaign had collapsed under the weight of her lies, and her settlement marked the end of her efforts to destroy me. Tyler had disappeared from my life completely, retreating into obscurity after signing away his shares. The agency was safe, my reputation was intact, but everything felt hollow. Winning didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding. The staff, shaken but loyal, rallied behind me as we worked to restore the agency's reputation. Clients who had wavered during the storm began to come back, reassured by my transparency and commitment. Emily and I worked tirelessly to shore up the company's operations, ensuring safeguards were in place to prevent anything like this from happening again. But while the professional side of my life stabilized, the personal side was another story. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything: Jessica's betrayal, Tyler's choices, the way I'd ignored the signs for so long. The anger had dulled, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my wife and son. I was grieving the life I thought I had. One evening, Beth, my senior manager, stopped by my office. "Mark," she said gently, "you've been through hell. You fought harder than anyone I've ever seen. But maybe it's time to take a break." "A break?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled faintly. "Yes, a break. Step away for a bit. Let the team handle things here. You've earned it." I wanted to argue, to insist that I needed to keep working, but she was right. I needed time to breathe, to process everything that had happened. And so, for the first time in years, I stepped back. I left the agency in capable hands and booked a week-long trip to a quiet cabin in the mountains. The solitude was exactly what I needed. For the first time in months, there were no meetings, no phone calls, no crises to handle. Just me, the mountains, and the endless silence. I spent my days hiking, sitting by the fireplace, and reflecting on everything I'd been through. I thought a lot about Jessica. I didn't love her anymore. That part of me had died the moment I saw her with Tyler on the beach. But I couldn't deny that I missed the life we'd built together, or at least the illusion of it. She had been my partner, my confidant, my wife. And losing her, no matter how justified, still hurt. I thought about Tyler, too. My son. I'd loved him unconditionally, and he'd betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. The anger had faded, but the pain lingered. I wondered if he felt any regret, if he missed me, if he ever thought about what he'd lost. I doubted I'd ever know. By the end of the week, I felt lighter. Not healed, far from it, but ready to face the world again. The cabin had given me clarity, a sense of perspective I hadn't had in months. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could choose how to move forward. When I returned to the agency, the team welcomed me back with open arms. They'd handled everything beautifully in my absence, and for the first time, I felt hopeful about the future. The chaos of the past few months had forged a stronger bond between us, a shared determination to keep the agency thriving. I also started seeing a therapist, something I'd resisted for too long. It wasn't easy, talking about Jessica, Tyler, and the betrayal felt like reopening old wounds, but it helped. Slowly, I began to let go of the anger and focus on rebuilding my life. It's been a year since the board meeting, and my life looks very different now. The agency is thriving, stronger than ever. I've reconnected with old friends, built new relationships, and even started dating again. It's not easy letting someone new into my life, but I'm learning to trust again, little by little. Jessica. Last I heard, she moved out of state. She's kept a low profile since the settlement, and I'm content to let her fade into the background. Tyler. I haven't heard from him since the day he walked out of my office. I'd like to think he's working on himself, but I've made peace with the fact that I may never know. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that trust is fragile. It takes years to build, seconds to break, and sometimes a lifetime to rebuild. But I've also learned that betrayal doesn't define you. It hurts, it changes you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. Life moves on. And so do I.